emerging ethical issues and dilemmas in business. So we will be looking at what we mean by ethical issues and dilemmas. So like I've said before, okay, here we will look at the proper definition. What do you mean by ethical issue? Ethical issue is a problem or situation or opportunity that requires an individual, group, or organization to choose among several actions that must be evaluated as right or wrong, ethical or unethical. So, like I've said, in ethical issue, the problem or the situation requires us to make a decision. Okay, we must make a decision. We must make a choice that we see that the decision factor is whether the action is right or wrong, whether the action is ethical or not ethical. So it's black and white. Okay, the decision is whether an action is black and white, ethical or non-ethical. But in ethical dilemma, it's somewhat more complex. We face a solution, we face a problem or an opportunity, we need to make a decision, but then the decision, there is no exact right or wrong. It's just that one option may be less ethical than the other decision, which is also not that ethical, or something that is perceived, one action is perceived as being uh, having more negative impact than another option that also have some negative impact but not as much as the other. So it's more of a gray type of decision. So that is called an ethical dilemma. So usually ethical dilemma is less easy to make decision on, but ethical issues, the decision is usually more clear cut. Okay. So in several of these slides after this, we will look at specific examples of ethical issues that businesses typically face. Okay. So first of all is misuse of company time and resources. Okay, so organizations typically face this kind of problem very regularly. A lot of organizations. In fact, there was a survey that mentioned that 75% organizations face this ethical issue of misuse of company time and resources. Okay, so the concept within this is called the time theft. Okay, time theft is estimated to cost companies hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Examples of time theft is that late arrivals. So when employees they arrive late at work, or they leave early, or long lunch breaks, or inappropriate sick days, or excessive socializing, or engaging in personal activities while at work. So these are considered as time theft. Okay, the employees stealing the company time. Using companies' computer software and internet services for personal business is one of the most common ways employees misuse company resources. Okay, so on one side, misusing of company time is doing other things, or arriving late, or having too long a lunch break. But the other thing is misusing the company resources, such as the computer and internet. Okay. So it is one of the most common ways employees misuse company resources. They use the company's computer, but they go on internet, but for personal, for personal use. Okay, for going into social media and so on. Many companies have policies delineating acceptable use of resources. So it is quite difficult to ensure that employees do not misuse computer resources of the company. So a lot of some of the organizations, they are slightly lenient. They say they will specify, okay, the company's computers and internet may be used for personal use, to a certain extent. Okay, so some of the companies, they try to give a little bit of leniency to ensure that employees can be controlled, or there is not so much negative behavior. But if they don't have a policy, or their policy is so tight that they restrict, there's no uh, uh, employees are not allowed to use computer software and internet services for personal use, then they might see that, in fact, because there's um, that rule, organizations, employees say that it is impossible to follow that rule, so they might as well break it to the extreme. Okay, so a lot of organizations, they are a bit lenient on this. Abusive or intimidating behavior. Um, so this is also one of the ethical issues that occur in organizations. Abusive or intimidating behavior includes such as physical threats, false accusations, being annoying, profanity, insults, yelling, harshness, ignoring someone, unreasonableness. Um, and within abusive behavior or intimidation, intent should be a consideration, meaning that how do we define something, and a behavior is abusive or intimidating? If it is abusive or intimidating, if there is intention for it to be abusive or intimidating. um, Bullying creates a hostile environment. So a lot of these abusive behavior results in bullying. This can be considered as workplace bullying, and it creates a hostile environment where people will lose motivation to do their work. Another ethical dilemma is lying. Okay, so we know that lying is untruthfulness. Okay, so there are several levels of lying. Okay, one is joking without malice. Sometimes we joke, but in our jokes we lie. So that kind of lying, or is joking without malice. There's no malicious intent. It's not to hurt anyone. It's just joking. Okay, but then there's a commission lying, and there's also omission lying. Commission lying is creating a perception or belief by words that intentionally deceive the receiver of the message. Okay, so it also entails intentionally creating noise in the form of technical explanations the communicator knows the receiver does not understand. Okay, so deceiving the receiver of the message by talking, giving out or speaking a lot of technical jargon that the receiver does not understand, with the intention to misguide the user, the listener, so that the listener understands something else which is not truthful. So that is an example of commission lying. Um, Whereas omission lying is intentionally not informing others of any differences, problems, safety warnings, or negative issues relating to the product or a company that significantly affect awareness, intention, or behavior. So commission and omission, the difference is commission is that you tell something that is not the truth, whereas omission is not telling the truth, or not saying something in order to hide the truth. Okay, so one is saying something to misrepresent the truth, and omission is not saying something so that the truth is not known. Okay. um, the next ethical dilemma or ethical issue is conflict of interest. Okay, conflict of interest is when an individual must choose whether to advance his or her own interests, those of the organization, or those of some other group. Okay, when employees are given a position such that he has the opportunity to further his own interests to the expense at the expense of his organization, so that position creates a conflict of interest. Okay, employees must be able to separate their private interests from their business dealings. Okay, one example is that um, uh, for example, I give example as a lecturer. Okay, so for example, I am teaching this subject, ethics and social responsibility, but I have a son who also takes the same subject under my class. Okay, so there is conflict of interest, because on one hand, I should be objective in teaching all of the students without any fear or favor, and I should grade their exams objectively without any bias. However, on the other hand, I want my son to excel in his studies, to want to get good grades. So now I have a conflict of interest. I am teaching my as a professional, I should be teaching objectively, assessing objectively. But I also have personally, I have my son who is as my own student, that I wish will get good grades. So there is a conflict of interest here. Next ethical issue is bribery. Okay, so bribery is the practice of offering something, usually money, in order to gain an illicit advantage from someone in authority. So usually bribery involves the person giving the bribe will offer some money to a person of authority, a person who makes decisions, so that the person will make decision, will make a decision that is favorable to the person giving the bribe without valid justification. Okay, so a person, uh, for example, a person is brought to court, and he is because of some wrongdoing, and in court he should be convicted of the crime. However, he offers money to the judge, so that the judge will overturn the decision, so that the judge will will decide that the perpetrator is innocent, whereas he is guilty. Okay, so illegal, to get illicit advantage. Okay, so to get something that is illicit, illegal. Okay, there is active bribery, and there is passive bribery. Active bribery is when the person who promises or gives the bribe commits the offense. Okay, so basically the person who is making the promise to give the bribe. And then passive bribery is an offense committed by the official who receives the bribe. Okay, the person who is receiving the bribe is giving the offer, then this is passive bribery. There are sometimes what is called as facilitation payments. Payments made to obtain or retain business or other improper advantage that do not constitute bribery payments for US company in some situations. There are certain situations when a small amount of money is given in order to expedite certain processes. Okay, so this kind of facilitation payments is slightly a gray area. It could be regarded as a bribe, but it could also be some sort of a service payment, so that things are yeah, so processes run more smoothly. So there is facilitation payments is slightly more difficult to say whether it's a kind of bribe or it's not a bribe.